Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Right now, we're going to do one of our favorite segments, which is our
Yes.
topic talk.
Topic
So,
talk. I love them
So we
because
just pick a topic and then we talk about it.
that's why we
And
call it topic talk. Isn't that great? It's so
exactly,
clever.
we're super creative with the names of our segments around here.
Mm-hmm.
So today, our topic talk is separating the art from the artist,
Oh,
which I
wow.
thought was
Yeah.
actually pretty good because that's this is something I struggle with. I don't know
It's
if
a real
anybody.
topic. I think it is a real
Yeah.
topic to consider. Tell me why you struggle with it. What's going on?
Because, and I think, and I will say that for me, it all started with Michael Jackson.
Of
I
course. Yeah.
was a huge Michael Jackson fan, huge, huge, huge. And I still like his music, but I do struggle with, the allegations and all the people. And I know that, there's a faction of people who don't believe that anything was wrong. And there's a faction of
Mm-hmm.
people that do, and you're probably
Mm-hmm.
never going to convince one side or the other.
Right.
But for me, the evidence was, I believed it. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty much there for me. And it just broke my heart. Not that, there were worse things that happened within that whole situation, but and
Sure.
then
Of course.
I banned him from my life. I wouldn't listen to any
Mm.
of his music, for years and years and years.
Mm.
And, I don't know. So it just kind of messed me up. And so now I will listen to it. But I won't purchase anything that I think is going to go.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, he's
Right.
dead now, obviously, but
Right.
I don't want any estate or anything making any money off of
Right.
me.
Well,
So
it's a very, very common. Obviously, it's a very common decision. It's a very common problem, and Michael Jackson is often the one that people talk about first when they talk about this topic, right?
yes,
This idea of, do you separate the art from the artist, or can you, in fact, separate the art from the artist? I don't think it's unnatural to struggle with it. I think it's very, very natural. I think art is so personal and so consumable these days that we take in so much around us between music and television and film, that when these people who create these projects suddenly turn and say or do something that we don't agree with, we're hit with this reality of, what does that mean for how we felt about their art, right? I
yeah,
love this song. I love this. Reminds me of this great moment in my life, or this time I saw this, it changed how I felt about whatever. And all of that is now tainted because this artist did or said something you don't agree with, or despicable, right? A horrible person has come out of this.
yeah,
So how do you reconcile that? And I think it's a fascinating topic. And I think one of the things that I found interesting doing research in this, I actually learned that most of us are using this concept incorrectly, believe it or not. This idea of separating the art from the artist comes from it's an academic meaning. And I'll read this here. I wrote some notes. The academic meaning is to read a work of fiction without knowing anything other than the author's name. It is an analytical style of consuming and critiquing fiction that allows the words, and only the words on the page, to resonate with the reader, allowing the reader to create their own moments with the text. So it's this idea of nothing influences you except the words on the page and you, the reader, and you get to have your own experience with it. So when we're talking about that, that's really what it means, apparently.
and what's funny is that is how I consume books. That's how
Exactly.
I read. I don't very rarely do I know anything about the authors,
Right.
except for the few handfuls that I do like and would read anything that they wrote.
Sure.
But that is how I consume it. It's just not. I think it's so interconnected.
It is, especially if you consider that the way we're using that topic now, the way we're talking about it today, it's really a question you're asking: can I still like the art? Can I still listen to the art of someone I don't agree with, or someone who is an awful person? Because sometimes it's not about agreeing with them, right? Sometimes
Right.
they're a horrible person. Sometimes you just don't agree politically with what they say. How does that affect you consuming their art? And I think if you consider that financial support of the artist is, in fact, a tacit endorsement of their way of life and what they believe, then you, in fact, cannot separate the art from the artist. Meaning, if
Yeah.
you believe that buying the book supports the artist and their way of thinking and their way of life, then you have to accept that. You can't reconcile that, right? But if you don't believe that, buying the book directly supports anti-trans views or what have you,
Right.
J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter. If you don't believe that, then it's not an issue for you. Most of us today, I think, believe that. Most of us believe that if we are supporting the author financially, we are tacitly agreeing with their lifestyle. And that's where the issue comes in. Would you agree?
I don't know. So it seems like you've done a little more research on this topic than I have. So I don't know if I agree with the consuming the art means I tacitly agree with the artist.
That's the question, right? Yeah.
Right. No, I'm just saying for me, I don't
Oh,
know if
uh-huh.
that's what I believe. Because for example, there are lots of artists, actors and actresses, probably less so, but music artists that I would say politically I don't agree with, or
Sure.
whatever, but I do like their music and I will still buy their music because I'm entertained, and that's what I get from their music what you're supposed to get from that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
the nostalgia, or the the memories, or just the good time singing along in the car. But I don't know. I guess you know what? And I guess that was just totally opposite of what I said earlier about Michael Jackson, because I don't want to buy anything and I don't want to support, you know what I mean? So
Well,
I don't
that's,
know.
yeah. And I don't think
I
there's one, I honestly don't think there's a right or wrong way to present this. I don't think there's a right answer to this
Well, and I think
conversation.
it's degrees, right? That must be
Agreed.
what that might
Hmm.
that's what the difference is, right?
I
So
think so.
if somebody I don't agree with politically is not
Right.
necessarily going to start me, unless all of their songs are very political, then I'm going to be like,
Well,
okay.
here's
But
well here's an example, if I can throw an example at you, of a
sure,
writer. Ender's Game. Do you remember the movie Ender's Game?
I do.
Do you remember when it came out? There was a big controversy right before it came out. It was revealed suddenly that the author of the book Ender's Game was anti marriage equality. He expressed some very severe anti homosexual, anti LGBT points of view. And yet
Okay.
he had written this wildly successful YA book. And this book was now optioned for a film. And it was launched, filmed, and they were getting ready to open, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden this was announced, and people were like, well, what do we do? Are we going to support, or are we going to not? And of course the actors and the creatives on the film went out and pled their case, saying they didn't know when they took on the project that he was this person, but they were
Right.
asking us to look at the artwork as standalone
Mm-hmm.
piece because they put so much work into it. And a lot of us had to decide whether we were going to support it or not, right?
Right.
I did not go watch the film because of that, but that was my personal choice. So I I I I, I get that it's challenging because I still listen to Michael Jackson music
Yeah.
when it
So
comes
do I.
on. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. But yet I drew the line at Ender's Game. So it's a very personal choice for sure, I think.
Absolutely. No, it is. And for me, I think that's the difference, is it's degrees. So, if it's just that we have a difference of opinion, I think people having differences of opinion now, there are degrees also of differences of opinion where I'm not going to be like,
Right.
that's not a difference of opinion. That's a difference about what human rights is. You know what I mean? So there's
Sure.
levels on that too. But if it's just like, I'm more liberal or I'm more conservative or whatever, that's fine. I think that that's the beauty of all of us individuals getting together, right? Learning from each other, and
Sure.
having different opinions. It would be so boring if we all thought exactly the same way.
Right.
But yeah, to degrees, That's
I think I agree with you. And I think no matter how much we have this conversation and no matter how many times people go around and around, I think we generally come back to the same ideas, that it's an incredibly personal choice. Obviously, there are degrees to how you're going to apply this,
mhm,
right? I know some people, my husband in particular, takes it very personally.
right,
He is very personally offended by things that I find very odd, quite frankly.
right.
Sometimes I'm like,
Well,
really? And he told me I could talk about this. So I giving this example of his, he was very angry and will no longer support Harrison Ford, the actor. He will not see any Harrison Ford films
okay,
because of Harrison Ford's alleged decision to hold up the Star Wars franchise because he wanted more money. When they were doing the whole new series many decades ago now, 7, 8, and 9, or 1, 2, and 3, or whatever the hell it was,
sure, hmm,
he wasn't going to come back. He wasn't going to come back. He
okay,
held out for a lot more money, and that offended a lot of fans, and Brian was one of them. So Brian
hmm,
was never, boom. For me, I was like, well, it's a business decision. I get it 100%. It didn't bother me whatsoever. So I get that it's a personal decision.
yeah.
Uh, but I
And then there's
find it.
me who didn't know that. I'm
Well,
like,
that's
what?
just it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
that's just it. And what like we all get to make our own choices about how we're going to
Of
handle that type
course.
of
Of
situation.
course.
So I don't think there is a one answer fits all kind of solution to this problem. But what I found really interesting in doing this research was a question that none of us were really talking about was, what do you do with that attachment, that emotional and personal attachment to the piece of art that you are now questioning whether you should enjoy, right? An entire generation of people grew up reading Harry Potter, right? They have profound connections to those books. Did you ever read all of those books?
I have multiple
Yeah,
times. I've
right.
seen
So
every one of
exactly,
the movies. Yeah.
profound connections to those books, and they are wonderfully inspiring. And as an adult, I read them and I go, oh, I can separate. I can look at, J.K. Rowling and Harry
Hmm.
Potter and go, that's a shame. I don't really feel the need to support her, but it's not going to affect me by not supporting her. But there are children who grew up loving that character. There are children who do. I have friends who have tattoos of Harry Potter characters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, these are
and this is where I
really
think,
affected by that. And how do they deal with this now disappointment from this author if they're disappointed by her actions?
so I think the difference is they don't idolize the author, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she did get a little bit more celebrity because she wrote those books and her backstory was interesting, being
Sure.
on welfare or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I for me, how I'm understanding this is the difference is it's one thing to fall in love with those characters, and you can still not idolize the artist, the person who wrote it.
So you're
She's a
still
great.
allowed to have those connections with Harry Potter. You're still
I think
allowed to
so.
have to the. I hope so too. I agree. I think you're still allowed to have the love and joy that you experience from
Because
those characters.
and I'll give you like, so we go back to talking about Michael Jackson. I
Mm-hmm.
idolized Michael Jackson. I thought
Mm-hmm.
he was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
He just lived this whole fantasy life and Neverland and all the animals and all. I just thought he was amazing. And so when
Sure.
all of that started coming out, I was one of the first people, and my knee jerk reaction was like, it's not true. It's not
Mm-hmm.
true. People are trying to get
Someone's
money
looking for
out of
money.
him. Someone's
Yeah.
looking, yeah, because
Right.
that's always it. But then the
Right.
more I was willing to pay attention,
Mm-hmm.
because initially I didn't even want to see anything about it. I just wanted to bury my head in the sand
Right.
and not pay any attention. And then the more that I did pay attention, the more I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just had to cut it all out for years. And
Yeah.
if a song came on the radio, I changed it. I
Mm-hmm.
deleted all of the music because by this point, it was more digital stuff. I got rid of any CDs that I had of his, everything just done.
Right. Right.
And another time that this happened was Bill Cosby. So
Perfect
my
example.
my
Yes.
grandfather
Yeah.
was a huge Bill Cosby fan. He used to have the records. So when
Mm-hmm.
these comedians came up and had records, um, he had all of Bill Cosby's records. I remember listening to him with my grandpa, and then I remember eventually watching him on TV. And Bill Cosby was like some of the funniest stuff I'd ever heard. And I love comedians. I just
You
love to
do. You
laugh.
do.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I had bought tickets to see him right before the story broke.
Wow.
And I was like,
I
oh
didn't know that.
no.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I had tickets. I
Wow.
had tickets. In fact, I still have the tickets somewhere.
Wow.
Um, and I was like, what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
I've already paid the money. Like, I'm not going to get my money back. Right.
Right. Right.
Um, and I had the physical tickets. Well, the decision ended up being made for me because by the time we were about a month out of his show, because I bought him like way far in advance.
Right.
By the time we were about a month out of the show, like another 20 women had come out
So
and
yeah.
they canceled the show.
They
And so
canceled the
I
show.
already got a
Yeah.
refund and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then it
Wow.
was
Wow.
like, what the hell?
Well,
But I
that's an
will tell
interesting
you,
example. Does it
yeah.
matter then now that he was in fact convicted, but his conviction has been overturned? So, like, where does that fall into whether you accept what he has done or not? For me, the damage is done, right?
Right. I
Bill
agree.
Cosby's damage is done. I don't care if on a technicality he was overturned. It seems very likely that he drugged women,
Yeah.
and did inappropriate things. So for me, it's done. But like, is that true for an Uber fan? Is that true for someone who wasn't sure that the conviction in the first place? It's just this area that it's not. This idea of cancel culture is really challenging when you really dive into when do you apply it and when do you not.
Yeah. And I agree. But I do think, as a society, we should draw some lines,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
there should be some hard and fast lines, because honestly, that's the best way that the populace can show support or non-support is, you
Right.
vote with your money, right?
That's
So
absolutely.
you have the
Yep.
opportunity. There's lots of places that I don't shop anymore.
Yeah.
for different reasons. So it's just an adjustment. And I do remember when the whole Bill Cosby thing came out, I remember being heartbroken on that as well, because I mean, who didn't grow up on the Cosby Show that's in our
Sure.
generation, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I do also remember thinking, at least, my grandfather had passed a few years before this all happened with Bill Cosby.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, at least my grandfather doesn't have to see that, because he was such a fan, like
Yeah.
such a fan.
Yeah.
So
And we don't quite realize sometimes what that fan connection is to the artist,
yeah,
and that really can upset and devastate some people. And it sounds silly, but we end up creating these really deep connections with the personalities we enjoy watching on TV and
yeah,
film. And when they disappoint us, it's real. It's a real disappointment.
absolutely.
I find this conversation fascinating. I hope you did. I hope that people at home did as well. I think this is something we'll probably talk about again.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
I have many
absolutely.
strong feelings about this, and I don't think this conversation will end whether Diddy is convicted or R. Kelly remains in prison or any of these things happen, because unfortunately it's an awful part of humanity, and we're going to have to continue to deal with it when people continue to disappoint us. And I just think it's a great conversation to be had.
Yeah, and absolutely, and people can definitely leave their thoughts in the comments, if there's any particular story they would like to share. I would love to hear it. It is disappointing when your heroes are not the people you thought they were. Um,
Yeah,
and then also sometimes the person wasn't your hero, but you really enjoyed their art. Like in the case of J.K. Rowling, I loved those books, but I didn't really know a whole
right.
lot about her. And then she started coming out as, all the anti-trans stuff online, and I was just like, oh no,
Right, right,
no,
right. No, oh,
yeah,
no, no. I know, and so I don't. Like I said, we're not solving any grand problems here today
right,
on our
of course,
podcast, but we're opening a dialogue and continuing the conversation. So join us in the comments below. Let us know your thoughts on this, and let us know if we're off the mark. Let us know what you think. If you're
yeah,
against what we say, that's fine too. We love respectful conversations and respectful debates. Keep it respectful,
keep
people,
it
and we won't have
respectful.
a problem.
We just delete that comment, delete.
Delete and block. We delete and block around here very quickly. Tina, would you like
All
to add
right.
anything else before we go?
That is all I have for this
All
segment.
right.
I appreciate it though.
All right. Very thorough. Folks, we'll see you next time. Come on back. We have another segment. Oh, you don't even want to know what's coming up next. Ooh,
Oh
it's a fun
gosh,
one.
I'm